it chapter by chapter, one bite at a time. So many adventures and mountains we can climb. Take it word for word, line by line, one bite at a time.
Welcome to Bite at a Time Books, where we read you your favorite classics one bite at a time. My name is Bree Carlile, and I love to read, and wanted to share my passion with listeners like you. If you want to know what's coming next and vote on upcoming books, sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. You'll also find our new t-shirts in the shop, including podcast shirts and quote shirts from your favorite classic novels. Be sure to follow my show on your favorite podcast platform so you get all the new episodes. You can find most of our links in the show notes, but also our website, biteatatimebooks.com, includes all of the links for our show, including to our Patreon to support the show, and YouTube, where we have special behind the narration of the episodes. We're part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you'd also like to hear what inspired your favorite classic authors to write their novels, and what was going on in the world at the time, check out the Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Please note, while we try to keep the text as close to the original as possible, some words have been changed to honor the marginalized communities who've identified the words as harmful, and to stay in alignment with Bite at a Time Books' brand values. Today we'll be continuing Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Chapter 7. Napoleon in a Good Humor. The Emperor, though ill and discommoded on horseback by local trouble, had never been in a better humor than on that day. His impenetrability had been smiling ever since the morning. On the 18th of June, that profound soul masked by marble beamed blindly. The man who had been gloomy at Austerlitz was gay at Waterloo. The greatest favorites of destiny make mistakes. Our joys are composed of shadow. The supreme smile is God's alone. Redet Caesar. Pompeius Flebit said the legionaries of the Fulminix Legion. Pompey was not destined to weep on that occasion, but it is certain that Caesar laughed. While exploring on horseback at 1 o'clock on the preceding night, in storm and rain, in company with Bertrand, the communes in the neighborhood of Rosum, satisfied at the sight of the long line of the English, campfires illuminating the whole horizon from Frechemont to Braine-l'Alleud. It had seemed to him that fate, to whom he had assigned a day on the field of Waterloo, was exact to the appointment. He stopped his horse, and remained for some time motionless, gazing at the lightning and listening to the thunder. And this fatalist was heard to cast into the darkness this mysterious saying, "We are in accord." Napoleon was mistaken. They were no longer in accord. He took not a moment for sleep. Every instant of that night was marked by a joy for him. He traversed the line of the principal outposts, halting here and there to talk to the sentinels. At 2:30, near the wood of Hougoumont, he heard the tread of a column on the march. He thought at the moment that it was a retreat on the part of Wellington. He said, "It is the rear guard of the English getting underway for the purpose of decamping. I will take prisoners the 6,000 English who have just arrived at Ostend." He conversed expansively. He regained the animation which he had shown at his landing on the 1st of March, when he pointed out to the Grand Marshal the enthusiastic peasant of the Gulf Juan and cried, "Well, Bertrand, here is a reinforcement already." On the night of the 17th to the 18th of June, he rallied Wellington. "That little Englishman needs a lesson," said Napoleon. The rain redoubled in violence. The thunder rolled while the Emperor was speaking. At 3:30 in the morning, he lost one illusion. Officers who had been dispatched to reconnoiter announced to him that the enemy was not making any movement. Nothing was stirring. Not a bivouac fire had been extinguished. The English army was asleep. The silence on earth was profound. The only noise was in the heavens. At 4 o'clock, a peasant was brought in to him by the scouts. This peasant had served as a guide to a brigade of English cavalry, probably Vivian's brigade, which was on its way to take up a position in the village of Ohain, at the extreme left. At 5 o'clock, 2 Belgian deserters reported to him that they had just quitted their regiment, and that the English army was ready for battle. "So much the better," exclaimed Napoleon. "I prefer to overthrow them rather than to drive them back." In the morning, he dismounted in the mud on the slope, which forms an angle with the Plansenoit road, had a kitchen table, and a peasant's chair brought to him from the farm of Rossomme, seated himself, with a truss of straw for a carpet, and spread out on the table the chart of the battlefield, saying to Soult as he did so, "A pretty checkerboard." In consequence of the rains during the night, the transports of provisions, embedded in the soft roads, had not been able to arrive by morning. The soldiers had had no sleep. They were wet and fasting. This did not prevent Napoleon from exclaiming cheerfully to Ney, "We have 90 chances out of 100. At 8 o'clock, the Emperor's breakfast was brought to him. He invited many generals to it. During breakfast, it was said that Wellington had been to a ball 2 nights before in Brussels, at the Duchess of Richmond's, and Soult, a rough man of war with the face of an archbishop, said, "The ball takes place today." The Emperor jested with Ney, who said Wellington will not be so simple as to wait for your majesty. That was his way, however. He was fond of jesting, says Fleury de Chambellon. A merry humor was at the foundation of his character, says Gourgaud. He abounded in pleasantries which were more peculiar than witty, says Benjamin Constant. These gaieties of a giant are worthy of insistence. It was he who called his grenadiers his grumblers. He pinched their ears. He pulled their mustaches. "The Emperor did nothing but play pranks on us," is the remark of one of them. During the mysterious trip from the island of Elba to France on the 27th of February, on the open sea, the French brig of war, the Zephyr, having encountered Le Brig Inconstant, on which Napoleon was concealed, and having asked the news of Napoleon from Le Inconstant, the Emperor, who still wore in his hat the white and amaranthine cockade, sewn with bees, which he had adopted at the Isle of Elba, laughingly seized the speaking trumpet and answered for himself, "The Emperor is well." A man who laughs like that is on familiar terms with events. Napoleon indulged in many fits of this laughter during the breakfast at Waterloo. After breakfast, he meditated for a quarter of an hour. Then 2 generals seated themselves on the truss of straw, pen in hand and their paper on their knees, and the Emperor dictated to them the order of battle. At 9 o'clock, at the instant when the French army ranged in echelons and set in motion in 5 columns, had deployed, the divisions in 2 lines, the artillery between the brigades, the music at their head as they beat the march, with rolls on the drums and the blasts of trumpets. Mighty, vast, joyous, a sea of casques, of sabers, and of bayonets on the horizon. The Emperor was touched and twice exclaimed, "Magnificent, magnificent." Between 9 o'clock and 10:30, the whole army, incredible as it may appear, had taken up its position and ranged itself in 6 lines, forming, to repeat the Emperor's expression, the figure of 6 V's. A few moments after the formation of the battle array, in the midst of that profound silence, like that which heralds the beginning of a storm, which precedes engagements, the Emperor tapped Haxo on the shoulder, as he beheld the 3 batteries of 12-pounders, detached by his orders from the corps of Erlon, Rail, and Lobau, and destined to begin the action by taking Mont Saint Jean, which was situated at the intersection of the Nivelle and the Genappe roads, and said to him, "There are 24 handsome maids, General." Sure of the issue, he encouraged with a smile as they passed before him the company of sappers of the 1st Corps, which he had appointed to barricade Mont Saint Jean as soon as the village should be carried. All this serenity had been traversed by but a single word of haughty pity. Perceiving on his left, at a spot where there now stands a large tomb. Those admirable Scotch greys with their superb horses, massing themselves, he said, "It is a pity." Then he mounted his horse, advanced beyond Rossomme, and selected for his post of observation a contracted elevation of turf to the right of the road from Genappe to Brussels, which was his second station during the battle. The third station? The one adopted at 7 o'clock in the evening, between La Belle Alliance and La Haye Sainte, is formidable. It is a rather elevated knoll which still exists, and beheld which the guard was massed on a slope of the plain. Around this knoll, the balls rebounded from the pavements of the road up to Napoleon himself. As at Brienne, he had over his head the shriek of the bullets and of the heavy artillery. Moldy cannonballs, old sword blades, and shapeless projectiles, eaten up with rust or picked up at the spot where his horse's feet stood. Scabra rubigine. A few years ago, a shell of 60 pounds, still charged and with its fuse broken off level with the bomb, was unearthed. It was at this last post that the Emperor said to his guide, Lacoste, a hostile and terrified peasant who was attached to the saddle of a hussar, and who turned round at every discharge of canister and tried to hide behind Napoleon. "Fool, it is shameful. You'll get yourself killed with a ball in the back." He who writes these lines has himself found in the friable soil of this knoll, on turning over the sand, the remains of the neck of a bomb, disintegrated by the oxidization of 46 years, and old fragments of iron which parted like elder twigs between the fingers. Everyone is aware that the variously inclined undulations of the plains, where the engagement between Napoleon and Wellington took place, are no longer what they were on June 18, 1815. By taking from this mournful field the wherewithal to make a monument to it, its real relief has been taken away. And history, disconcerted, no longer finds her bearings there. It has been disfigured for the sake of glorifying it. Wellington, when he beheld Waterloo once more 2 years later, exclaimed, "They have altered my field of battle. Where the great pyramid of earth, surmounted by the lion, rises today, there was a hillock which descended in an easy slope towards the Nivelles road, but which was almost an escarpment on the side of the highway to Genappe. The elevation of this escarpment can still be measured by the height of the two knolls of the two great sepulchres which enclose the road from Genappe to Brussels. One, the English tomb, is on the left. The other, the German tomb, is on the right. There is no French tomb. The whole of that plain is a sepulchre for France. Thanks to the thousands upon thousands of cartloads of earth employed in the hillock 150 feet in height and half a mile in circumference, the plateau of Mont Saint Jean is now accessible by an easy slope. On the day of battle, particularly on the side of La Haye Sainte, it was abrupt and difficult of approach. The slope there is so steep that the English cannon could not see the farm, situated in the bottom of the valley, which was the center of the combat. On the 18th of June, 1815, the rains had still further increased this acclivity. The mud complicated the problem of the ascent, and the men not only slipped back, but stuck fast in the mire. Along the crest of the plateau ran a sort of trench whose presence it was impossible for the distant observer to divine. What was this trench? Let us explain. Braine-l'Oude is a Belgian village. Ohain is another. These villages, both of them concealed in curves of the landscape, are connected by a road about 1.5 leagues in length, which traverses the plain along its undulating level, and often enters and buries itself in the hills like a furrow, which makes a ravine of the road in some places. In 1815, as at the present day, this road cut the crest of the plateau of Mont Saint Jean, between the two highways from Genappe and Nivelles. Only, it is now on a level with the plain. It was then a hollow way. Its two slopes have been appropriated for the monumental hillock. This road was, and still is, a trench throughout the greater portion of its course. A hollow trench, sometimes 12 feet in depth, and whose banks, being too steep, crumbled away here and there, particularly in winter, under driving rains. Accidents happened here. The road was so narrow at the Brainleod entrance that a passerby was crushed by a cart, as is proved by a stone cross which stands near the cemetery, and which gives the name of the dead, Monsieur Bernard de Beer, merchant of Brussels, and the date of the accident, February 1637. It was so deep on the tableland of Mont Saint Jean that a peasant, Mathieu Nicaise, was crushed there, in 1783, by a slide from the slope, as is stated on another stone cross, the top of which has disappeared in the process of clearing the ground, but whose overturned pedestal is still visible on the grassy slope to the left of the highway between La Haye Sainte and the farm of Mont Saint Jean. On the day of battle, this hollow road, whose existence was in no way indicated, bordering the crest of Mont Saint Jean, a trench at the summit of the escarpment, a rut concealed in the soil was invisible. That is to say, terrible. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books today, while we read a bite of one of your favorite classics. Again, my name is Bree Carlile, and I hope you come back tomorrow for the next bite of Les Miserables. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com and check out the shop. You can check out the show notes or our website, biteatatimebooks.com, for the rest of the links for our show. We'd love to hear from you on social media as well.